Welcome to 9 more tier 5 towers that absolutely need to be buffed. This is part 2 in a series. Watch part 1 if you haven't already. Alright, so I gotta start this out with a hot take. Everyone was saying in the comments of the last video that Orc Mage deserves to be in the top 5 of the tier 5 towers and can actually be considered usable. I strongly disagree. This tower is bad, and it's not just bad, it's mediocre, which is worse than being bad, because it's never going to be buffed, and it's gonna forever stay in this mediocrity, never seeing the light in actual legitimate strategies ever. It's only gonna be used on like beginner and intermediate maps as newbies noodle around with this fun looking cute tier 5 tower. This thing's not good, okay guys? It is a tier 5 DPS oriented tower that mostly focuses around Moab DPS. The bolts do extra damage to Moabs and have high levels of damage but low pierce. So I decided to hook this guy up with the Alchemist to see how it does. Now granted, it is a highest attack speed tower, so the Alchemist isn't going to help too much, but let me tell you guys, I recorded this without the Alchemist first. It was, I can't even include that footage. That's just not safe for work. So anyways, this guy, he just gets overwhelmed so easily. It's crazy how just after round 80 happens, this guy just hits an absolute brick wall. He costs about $7,000 less than the Comanche and cannot even hold up against the 80s rounds by himself with the 4th tier Alchemist. He has a 4th tier Alchemist helping him. What the fuck? Like, what the hell is this guy actually supposed to be good against? DDTs? You'll see this guy sucks ass against round 95, gets cockblocked by a lot of things. Is ZOMGs? Yeah, sure. I mean, you know, he'll knock off the ZOMG layer, but so can so many other things. It's all about the super ceramics of the hard as hell parts. BAD? No, not really. No, not at all. Absolutely not. Hell, even against ZOMGs, it takes a while to kill. Its DPS is way lower than the only other good DPS tower in the game, which is Comanche, which is where I think it should be, to say the least. So now you've seen it against the majority of the 80s and 90s threatening rounds. I didn't even go to the super duper hard ones because it'd just be incredibly embarrassing for this tower. Now I'm going to show you how a real 5th tier tower actually defends these rounds. The Comanche Commander, the only actual balanced 5th tier tower in the game. Now I'm obviously going to do this without exploiting any of the bugs, like the moving the main Alchemist away. And there's also another subtle bug where if you get your Alchemist before your Comanche, it'll be twice as strong. I'm not going to do any of that garbage, okay? I'm just gonna treat it nicely. Now, as you can see, it's destroying all the balloons right at the entrance, and I'm realizing, wow, this is actually way too easy. So I'm gonna start sending the 80 plus rounds at the same time. This is gonna be dealing with rounds 80 through 84 at the same damn time. Actually, not including 80, but you still get the point. It's including dealing with a lot of rounds, and I'm going to continue doing this, and you're going to see the absolute DPS of this guy. But the thing is, like, right, it's not overpowered because it's still not an automatic win all. This is actually one of the longer maps in the game, especially for advanced maps, so of course Comanche Commander is going to do good on this. And even still, it actually eats shit to some rounds. It eats shit to 95, eats shit to 98, barely eats shit to 100. Obviously, once you get this, it isn't a guaranteed victory. You still need a solid amount of DPS alongside it, but this is actually adequate DPS that a DPS tower needs. It's not busted, it's just decent. Like, watch how much it loses to round 98. You still need to have thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of defense to help it out, because clearly it's not like it's close or anything. It's just smacked. And if you think like this is bad, imagine it on Peninsula, imagine it on Dark Castle, imagine it on High Finance, short maps like that. Yeah, of course it's gonna eat shit, because those maps actually are harder and need like actual strategy. And speaking of hard maps, there's a reason why Comanche is pretty much the only 5th tier tower used on these hard maps in chips mode, because besides Permaspike, it's the only tower powerful enough to actually deal with it. I would love to see people try to use Orc Mage in scenarios where Comanche has been used and find any success. I don't even think you could use Orc Mage on like advanced maps, chips mode, and win. I would love to see people try to use Orc Mage and beat High Finance chimps, Peninsula chimps, underground chimps, off the coast chimps, hell, even Dark Castles chimps, and dare I say Half Shake Outs chimps, which was recently beat using the Comanche recently. So yeah, no, that tower isn't even close. The only advanced maps you could probably pull off Orc Mage on is Another Brick and maybe Cornfield Chimps, and even those are going to be really, really, really freaking hard. This guy is as close as you're going to get to actual DPS, and I think this is the power level of the Comanche. Once Kiwi fixes its bugs, I really hope they don't nerf it further, because this should be a benchmark of what other towers should aspire to be. Take note, guys, this about $70,000 overall just Comanche Alchemist Village combo is what other DPS towers should strive to be. Definitely do not want to bring down the power levels of this tower, but instead bring others up to it. So how would I buff the Orc Mage? Well, honestly, so because it's mediocre, I would definitely be careful with not over buffing it. I'm not going to take an aggressive stance as the previous 5 minutes dictated. I'm going to be more conservative, where I say maybe just knock down its price a few $1,000s, like $4,000, $5,000 left is probably fine. Or if you want to do something else, up the Pierce, because Pierce really seems to screw it. It'll hit its Pierce cap pretty much every time, and even then it's like not going to do that much damage against the ceramic. So either up its Pierce, upgrade its damage per bolt. Next up, we have the Prince of Darkness, which is so cool looking, but so trash. It really actually becomes underwhelming once you see it in action. Sure, it's nice to see the zombie BFBs and zombie mobs and all that, but they're really actually not that powerful, which is kind of nuts. I mean, they do like pretty decent pop power, but the limits it has can be really infuriating. So it only spawns the zombie balloons if balloons are popped in its range, and then I think it spawns more if it pops it itself or something like that. And the balloons it spawns are also based off the balloons that are popped. I don't know exactly how that goes, but basically it's relying on stuff being popped in its range. So you need to have it in addition to other towers, but then usually other towers contribute a lot more than this guy does. So something that would help a lot is having automatic balloon spawning at the start of the round. Probably spawning like 3 or 4 zombie BFBs just at the start of every round could be really good for this guy. And then something that's infuriating is when the zombie balloons just die. They just die. They don't like reach enough pops. They don't hit the end of the track. They just die halfway in the track because they have some sort of, you know, length maximum or something like that, which I think is kind of stupid, not gonna lie. It's really unsatisfying to just see the zombie balloons die just then, where they could go so much further and pop so much more balloons. I would love to see them only stop once they hit the start of the track. And honestly, you probably wouldn't even need to up the pop power of them if you just did those 2 changes. Maybe you would still need to up the pop power, but those aesthetic changes and those just quality of life changes would make the tower a lot more satisfying. I still don't know if it'd make it good. I think it'd still be underwhelming as pop power, but I think those things should be gotten out of the way before there's even a talk about continuing to buff the tower. Next up is the Sub Commander, 5th tier sub, which is almost a usable tower, except for the fact that there's just not that many ponds where it's really going to make use out of. Like, obviously there's some really good water heavy maps like Spice Islands and... No, that's about it, actually. So it doesn't really have any great domains. Like, it has to rely on smaller ponds where you might not be able to actually get that much value out of it. You'll be able to get like a few submarines, and that's about it. And that can really take away from the usability of this tower. Like, some maps you're really only going to get 5, 7 subs max, and I don't know if that really justifies getting a sub commander ever, really, outside of Spice Islands again. So honestly, the buffs it gives isn't really going to be useful against the low amount of towers it'll buff. Say if you have the dream scenario where maybe you have 12, 15, 16 subs, maybe that's the most you can squeeze in some of the map's ponds, or if you just feel like being a baller and bringing out that portable lake. You have that dream scenario, it still doesn't actually provide that much DPS. It gives, I believe, +5 pierce and +1 damage to the subs in its range, where, you know, there's still like decent towers. It helps out a lot. They seem to actually be lacking in damage and pierce, but it doesn't actually seem to be good enough to be a good DPS force. And plus, once you add in a bunch of subs, the price just really seems to pile. Suddenly you're gonna have a $60,000 defensive subs, including the sub commander, and still not really able to beat some of the 80s or 90s rounds, especially not the 90s. Holy crap. So the thing I was to choose to suggest about buffing this is adding in an attack speed buff to the subs as well. It's just the buff it doesn't give, so it might as well throw in attack speed since it already has pierce, since it already has damage. That's the last thing asked to buff. And then having the, the subs attack faster is just kind of a cool thing as well. Seeing the sub army become a lot stronger and potentially potent. I could see like a 50% attack speed buff to these subs, really significantly increasing the pop power, actually making it useful, making it worthwhile using. Because even on the maps with heavy subs, I'm also thinking Peninsula comes to mind. People still mostly focus on land towers. They'll get like a few subs because they're not bad, but they'll never get the sub commander. That's just never ever used. Next up, we have the 5th-2 Super Monkey, the AntiBloom. This one's a bit more of a pet peeve, but someone needs to do something about the dipshit targeting on this guy. You have no fucking say about how he's going to shoot, but he's always going to shoot like a dipshit, and you know this. This is one of the few things you can guarantee in life. So one of its arms will always be on last. I don't know why the fuck its arm's on last, but it will always be on last, and it's so bad. No one ever wants half of their tower on last, especially when it costs $125,000 plus dollars. Like, no thank you. There's no benefit off this heavy on last except fucking you over against rounds which you can clearly defend on. All it's gonna do is cause the slow balloons to pop into fast balloons basically at the same time, overwhelming that one arm that's actually doing the right thing and aiming on first. Just have both of the arms do what the target says. Next up, we have the Grandmaster Ninja, which a lot of people actually love, and I may get some flack for this, but this thing is way worse than people think it is. So I think it's actually best and most cost effective when you have a plain Grandmaster Ninja buffed by a 4th tier Alchemist. That way the majority of its shots will be buffed and it'll actually have decent pierce, decent damage and all that. I think it's like half or maybe 2/3 of its shots are buffed by the Alchemist, and that's actually pretty solid, all things considered. It can provide some pretty decent group balloon pop power for not too bad of a price. Like, it is still expensive, still a $40,000 tower. So for $40,000 as a DPS tower, you better be expecting some serious DPS. And as plain with the Alchemist, it's not terrible. It's not that bad, but everyone's like, but Tyler, you can just buff it with the Shinobi Ninjas and you'll be amazing. Well, you know what? Let's fucking try that. Let's try that and see how it does. Well, we got some 10 Shinobi Ninjas down. We're gonna send the same round we sent fucking before. And oh, look at that. Wow, look at that. Is that actually doing worse? Is that somehow doing worse than it was without the Shinobi Ninjas? Yeah, it turns out when it attacks faster, it's gonna have a lot less frequent of Alchemist buffing or something like that. I'm not entirely sure how it works, but it seems like it's actually legitimately just doing worse, and now it's going to be having shit pierce a lot of the time, and everything is just going to run right through, so that's not that great. Well, now maybe we'll go for 20, and now with 20 Shinobi Ninjas, it actually has pretty okay pop and power. I have to say, it can actually solo Wave 89, it can solo a decent amount of the 90s pretty well. Actually, no, there's a lot of the 90s rounds where it definitely does not solo, and if you actually do the math here, you realize, holy shit, 20 Shinobi Ninjas, that's a lot of money on this tower. You realize if you count all this up, you've spent over $100,000. Obviously, if you take into account the Alchemist and the Village, you spent a lot of money on just raw DPS. Now, sure, it's good against stuff like DDTs and all that, but it's just not good against group balloons. It's going to lose on actually so many of the 90+ rounds. It's honestly insane how bad it does. So, and that's like the majority of your chimp's money. So what are you doing, actually? You're just spending all this money on a tower that's actually not even that good, even at like maximum efficiency. So honestly, one of the things it really needs is just the pierce buff. Each of those shurikens need to pop more balloons, maybe +2, maybe +4 pierce for each of them. It's just not that great because it just gets so overwhelmed easily by group balloons. You know, adding 2 or 4 pierce would be a lifesaver to this thing, and actually maybe give it some reasonable competitive use, and that's all you really want. Next up, we have Permanent Brew, which would probably be the magic to make any of these towers that were before mentioned into decent towers. However, as it is right now, it is severely overpriced. It costs 65k by itself and close to 75k as a whole tower. Probably not that much, but still it adds up in price. And it's, you know, obviously it's a really good tower. It makes average towers into insane towers, and it makes insane towers to game-ending towers. Like, you know, one of the best synergies it has is a Sun God. However, if you want to get this, you're not getting much else. You're really not. You're not affording jack shit else. Maybe like a couple Sun Gods, maybe one Comanche, and a couple other random things. You're really not gonna find too much more money if you really want to target this guy down. And at the point that you get him, you probably could have gotten away with any other defense in its place. Like, it's just that expensive. You're not going to really see it be used in Chimps mode or anything like that. It's obviously a very solid late game because you're going to want to buff all your towers with it. It's obviously very, very good in that regard, but if you're going late game, you're not going to be tight on money. That's just something that's never happening, ever. You're always going to have $10 billion in the bank, so you're going to get this thing no matter what. So honestly, just knocking this guy's price down to maybe 50k, 45k could be pretty solid, and I could see people squeezing him into a few strategies and being able to afford other towers at the same time. Next up, we got 5th tier Druid, Spirit of the Forest, which is a really cool tower. It's got the vines everywhere that destroy ceramics and definitely Moabs on most maps, but it is pretty damn expensive, all things considered. So by the time you get this thing up, it'll definitely be past round 80. And after round 80, you guessed it, this guy sucks. Super ceramics shit on this so hard. So it's usually decent against normal ceramics because it really only takes 18 ticks for this thing to kill a ceramic because it has infinite popping power. Infinite reds is equivalent to 1 red. However, as far as a super ceramic, that takes 108 ticks, which means those speedy boys are going to run right past your vines, not even taking that much damage relatively. So they're so fast and just strong that those vines aren't going to do crap against those ceramics. So there seems to be a recurring theme with a lot of these 5th tier towers where they just suck against super ceramics. A lot of people in the comment section of the first video definitely recognize that. Maybe super ceramics need to be nerfed, but I honestly don't know how Ninja Kiwi could actually go about this, because if you think about it, super ceramics are a really good addition. People know this, how it reduces lag and all that, but I'm trying to think of any decent alternative that also reduces lag while not fucking over the majority of the 5th tier towers. And the closest thing I can come to it is just buffing the struggling 5th tier towers with taking into account that super ceramics are very difficult. Because I'm feeling a lot of these towers were tested with non-super ceramic blimps. Like, people were sending regular BFBs against it, not super ceramic BFBs. And I think that should really definitely be taken into account. And I think that challenge of free play should be met with equally powerful towers. Next up, we have Carpet of Spikes, which has been buffed recently. Newsflash, it's still less cost effective than just getting a bunch of 4th tier spike factories. It's equivalent in popping power to 4 4th tier spike factories, and it costs more than the price of 4 4th tier spike factories. So having this guy is generally just a waste of money. It's only good if you want to save space, and only good if you really care about the spikes sticking around forever. But even that doesn't compare to the 4 4th tier spike factories just having more raw non-ability popping power, and that's kind of a big deal. So this guy really just needs a big price buff, or something I think that would be cooler is having the spike storm be more frequent. As of currently, it activates every 15 seconds, which is kind of slow. Every 10 seconds could be a lot better of buffs, have it a lot more useful on DDT rounds like round 99, because otherwise it just gets overwhelmed and it's very sad. So that could help out a lot, or just knocking down its price to something like 37,000, maybe even less, 35k. I think I'd rather see the permanent spike storm go off more frequent, though. I think it'd be more fun. It's more fun when the 5th tier towers do big, flashy, exciting things more frequently than just making them cheaper and just kind of weak. And finally, we have the 5th tier village, the Primary Expertise, which is actually not that bad of a tower. Its main ballistic attack is kind of overrated. It's Once again, decent until you have super ceramics, and super ceramics just run right through this guy. Most of the time, he's not gonna really get that much damage in, but against like Moabs and other stuff, it's, you know, it's okay. But its real benefit, I actually think, comes from what it does to primary towers. So once you have 5th tier primary expertise, the first 2 tiers of primary towers will be free, and you'll have that 3rd tier village buffing the range, the attack speed, the pierce maybe of the primary towers, and that's pretty cool. So something I think I'd like to see the 5th tier village do is expand on those buffs even more. Give primary towers even more range, even more pierce, even more attack speed. Dare I say +1 damage? That's probably too ridiculous though. It's probably too over the top, overpowered. So maybe just a little bit more range, attack speed, pierce, that sort of thing. And I can see that being pretty balanced, because honestly I still think its support is a lot more effective than its attack. So I think focusing on the support could be pretty cool and could create some pretty exciting synergies within the primary towers. So once again, this video is getting pretty long, so I'm going to cut it off. Basically, the whole point of this video is explained during the Comanche rant. Just rewatch that if you somehow skimmed over it. That's probably the most important part of the video. That being said, these aren't the worst of the worst of the 5th tier towers. Obviously, they're better than Supermines. Obviously, they're better than Gluestorm. Obviously, they're better than Wizardlord Phoenix. But comparing these towers to those is really unfair and not something we should be doing. We don't want to just focus on the trashiest towers in the game and bringing them up to the mediocrity these towers exist at, because even the mediocre towers are not good enough. You want strategy diversity? Buff these towers. Do not focus too much on the trashiest of the trash towers. We need to actually have more A tier, more S tier towers, because just doing Comanche every single game is boring. What can I say? That being said, thanks guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Please leave any concerns in the comment section. Please keep it civil. I know I was a bit aggressive, but I tried to do it without insulting people, so I hope you guys can do the same. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you all next time. Peace out.